The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to another week here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. I'm Ben Ball, pastor of Broad Creek United Methodist Church. Also, Reverend Robert Cornegie is with us, associate pastor, Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle. And also, Dr. Robert Wilson is the author of Nullifying God. And so we're glad to see everybody here. Good morning, folks. It's good to have you. Good to have you all here as we we pray for Carl, who wasn't feeling very well today.
Right.
Reverend Carl Zarowski, who normally is with our band, our little band here. Let's start today with as we take a look at how faith intersects with the marketplace and with our politics and with the world. And let's see. This one, let's start with in Malibu, California. This comes from The Stream, which we often quote from, stream.org. The headline is, Malibu officials pressure church to stop feeding the needy, claim they are increasing homelessness. And the Malibu United Methodist Church and a Christian charity program called Standing Stone offered free meals to the needy twice a week for the past 3 years, but stopped after city officials reportedly told them that they were attracting too many homeless people to the city, according to The Independent. Malibu Mayor Skylar Peak denied ordering the church and other Christian groups to stop feeding the homeless, but also apologized at a public hearing for any miscommunication over the issue. According to the Los Angeles Times, very succinctly, they claimed that we are increasing homelessness, Dawn Randall, a member of the church, said in an email after receiving an email from city officials. How do we approach this? I mean, this is Robert. This is our mission. This is what we do. I mean, we just had, and if you're a lectionary person, we just had the scripture of when did you see me hungry?
Yeah.
And when did you see me naked? This is Matthew 25. That's what we're called
right.
to do.
The least of these.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's well, look, cities have their marketing agendas, and one of their marketing agendas, I'm just assuming that in Malibu, is that they have a fairly low homelessness problem. Or, I mean, Malibu, you can sleep outside except when it's raining. Anywhere you want, basically. I mean, the climate is so pleasant. But at any rate, this is where this clashes. The least of these. How do we handle the least of these? And that's a great point, Ben. And so the city is denying that they officially said don't do it, but he said he did not deny that city officials accused them of making the problem of homelessness worse. And it sounds like they had just gotten in this new rapid transit system. Mm-hmm. And so for the last 3 years, two meals a week, they're providing food for homeless folks. And so evidently the word's gotten out. And so I guess their claim is that people from other communities are coming to Malibu to benefit on these 2 days.
They're using the metro line.
And it's a free one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, it's sad, so sad.
Well, it to me, I looked at it and I'm thinking, first of all, for them to take this position in today's social justice warrior culture is
in a sanctuary state.
Is unbelievably hypocritical. It's like you don't see you want to be able to say, yes, we love social justice, but no, you can't get in on that.
Yeah.
And it just bugs the daylights out of me. When I volunteered up at the food shuttle in Raleigh, we would pick up food from various locations and deliver it to projects or the
Right.
soup kitchen or whatever. And I met some interesting people on that route. I think I probably mentioned it before, but I would come into the Raleigh Rescue Mission, and there was a fellow there. His name was Arnie, and I would drop food off on Fridays. Arnie would come out, help me unload it. We got to talking, a young African-American man. And one day, he came out and he said, "Bob, this is my last day here. I was hoping I'd see you. I got me a job." And he gave me a big hug. And I felt so like, yes, this is the way it's supposed to be. But that man was taken care of by the rescue mission, with meals and a place to stay. And I'm sorry that Malibu doesn't like homeless people, but come on, people, you have the money. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I get off on it.
Well, it goes to the shallowness of
Yes.
of the secular world view of social justice. Really, I mean, it's social justice as long as it's not too aggravating. It's okay as long as it doesn't. They're not riding my bus.
Yeah, it's that old NIMBY thing. Not in my backyard.
Oh, yeah, NIMBY.
NIMBY, and we saw that with the windmills.
Well, we see it in all kinds of
everywhere.
issues.
It's every place. And so now they're saying, okay, well, you guys are really, you're kind of like the fly paper that you put up in the summer. You're attracting too many. You're attracting more than you're taking out of the system. And so, yeah, it's. I think that's a great point about the social justice warriors today. Love the idea of the nobleness of helping the those that need help, but just don't hang around.
Yeah,
Right. When you're helped, just sort of disappear, and it's that hypocrisy, it's that double standard, that is just so sad. And one of the leaders of one of the church program said that we've had relationship with some of these people now for over 3 years, just like you were talking about, and now we're not able to do that anymore. Now, they voluntarily, because there was no official thing, they voluntarily chose to not continue the program.
I'm sure they'll try to reach out in other ways, but again, this issue we have this challenge in all our churches. Really, I mean, we may do programs to feed the hungry, but how much do we do to invite them?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't get real until they're sitting next to us in worship.
Yes.
So we have to get real about that too. I mean, that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
They were inviting folks to come and be with them.
Yeah, that's right.
And it wasn't just a matter of just the meal either. So like you said, they had relationships with these people.
Yeah, and a 3-year program, that's been curtailed. You're at 3 years, you're just really kind of getting to the point where you're going to start seeing some results of the effort of the transformational work of the gospel as it starts having effect. I mean, some are immediate. Some, for some it's like walking in a dark room and turning on the light.
Some of us it took 40 years.
Exactly, but for others of us it's a slow sunrise.
That's right.
And so you really don't get to see the fruit, the eternal fruit, so to speak, that would make a real difference.
Well, I think it's when someone who does not look the same way you do. Either pick whatever choice you want. I mean, but the point is they don't dress like you do, they don't act like you do, they don't talk like you do. But when you see that light in their eyes, that you're not treating them any differently than you treat anybody else, that means so much to them. And here, coming in twice a week for a meal, it's not just, here's your meal, here's your meal, here's your meal. People can get to talk to them. They can treat them like a whole human being. And it's so there's a healing process
That's
which
right.
you can put there, especially if you can build a relationship. And it's not easy. I'm not saying that it's an easy thing, but you're saving a person. You're reaching down inside them and said, believe that there are people out there who care for you and love you. But a city council that says, well, no, you can't do that anymore.
Or they discourage you because they say that, oh, you're taking advantage of this this service here, but then, well, that's what it's there for, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it is hypocritical to say that that's not.
Look, there are homeless in every
Absolutely.
community.
Yep.
The only thing that's happening here, basically, is that they're getting kind of revealed. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's becoming
Someone has invited them
right
out of the shadow and into the dinner table.
And again, what is the Malibu vision of who they are as a city, and can they expand their vision to include helping the least of these?
Well, it's interesting because what you just said struck me that the Malibu culture is almost the culture of the Pharisees of the Old Testament. Don't touch my robe, you're going to make it dirty.
Right.
There's that kind of it just doesn't work. It's false.
Yeah, well, trying to attack hypocrisy at every level here.
Every
Faith,
level.
Faith Matters on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. We'll have more to come in a moment. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Carnegie and Dr. Bob Wilson, who's joining us here today. And Dr. Bob and Robert, our next article here is something that comes down in kind of both of y'all wheelhouse, is biology, and we look at your work with the Pregnancy Center. And this is from it's from the ChristianHeadlines.com. It says, Ohio Senate votes to outlaw abortion for Down syndrome babies. Ohio Right to Life President Mike Gondakis was pleased to have Senate Bill 164 move a step closer to outlawing abortion of a child with Down syndrome. There's a reason that 99% of people with Down syndrome are happy with their lives, Gondakis adds. He says they live joyfully in a way that is contagious to others. We're happy that Ohio Senate recognizes their lives as worth living. Is the law really necessary is the question. The ECLJ, the European Center of Law and Justice, recently received an audience with the United Nations to discuss the high abortion rates of children after they had been diagnosed with Down syndrome. This is really something that I had not even considered in terms of legal action or where this might go legally. I know that we were parents at a late age. We were both mid-30s, and one of the recommendations is to get amniocentesis at that time. And we had already decided, even though we were not churchgoers at the time, but we had already decided this was not going to be for the purposes of abortion. We would get it for the purposes of planning. In case it came out that way, and it didn't. But we had already kind of settled, hopefully, that discussion. But it is a discussion that obviously a lot of parents have, and a lot of women have, about what to do when that diagnosis comes up. Robert, you work with the Pregnancy Center. You have worked in Right to Life campaigns for a long time. Is this an advancement, or is this again sort of our note from the last segment? Hypocrisy.
Yeah, no. Several months ago, we did a segment on the Iceland phenomena.
Right.
You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And in Iceland, they have there was big headlines that Iceland is on the verge of eradicating Down syndrome, and that the way they were doing it was by abortion. So that if a couple came in and had the test done, the amniocentesis test done, and it was discovered the chromosomal damage, that there was high likelihood of Down syndrome, they were I don't know if it's legally but they were strongly recommended to abort the baby. And so they had an article recently that you just don't see Down syndrome kids in Iceland anymore.
But that's not because they don't occur.
Right.
It's because they are terminated.
They are
early.
terminated during pregnancy. They are
It's eugenics.
killed in pregnancy. Yeah, so they are their
Selectively
choice. Yeah,
chosen.
of you know, we talked about last week. We talked about the gene splicing and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. Well, this is you just kill them. That's how you stop this thing. You just eliminate them from the process. And so, to me, I think this is a reaction because there was a lot of publicity in the major media about this, and that this is in reaction to that because it is becoming. I have a number of great friends from Mercy Ships and other places that have Downs kids, and here locally as well. And I mean, they are delightful children. I mean, I'm not saying they're
adults,
complicated. There are always
I know-
complications.
I know
It's
Down
always-
syndrome adults too. They're
Exactly, and they
wonderful.
are just they really are. They kind of the majority of them just don't have that kind of mean gene, and they're just pleasant to be around. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I see this as a step in the right direction. You know, the problem is that anytime you do make any move incrementally against free and open abortion, you receive the wrath of the industry.
Yeah.
Because this is not just a group of people saying, oh, you know, women need to have. This has become an industry, and with products for sale and everything else. And so, you know, we, whatever we can do to slow that machine down, I say, you know, throw that monkey wrench in there.
Well, the
in
other thing-
gears.
I'm sorry. The other
Go ahead.
thing, though, is that this publicizes abortion in a way you wouldn't see it otherwise. That-
Very true.
It publicizes it, and it gets people to think. But there's also the flip side of that. Well, okay, let's say we say no to Down syndrome. Well, how many different, I know there's a number of different genetic diseases that a child can have that will impact them in one way or another. But then you get down to, well, what about the folks that say, oh, I only want to have boys. Oh, you're pregnant, honey, with a girl. I'm sorry, we've got to get rid of her.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a slippery slope all the way down. And in thinking in this, because I saw it, Ben, and I've thought about this before, and actually I bring it up in the book, but the point is, you've got an ovum, an egg, you've got a sperm. The ovum contains all of the genetic material, has all of the enzymes, everything ready to go. Once that sperm penetrates and completes that genome, then it goes on its way. Splits to 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells, 16, and then the cells begin to differentiate. And all of that information, some of it goes to form the placenta, and then you get a baby. You know, right from time zero, you've got a human being going there. And then you think of it, and we call it various stages. Oh, they'll call it a fetus, they'll call it a newborn, they'll call it a toddler, and on and on and on. Preteen, teen, young adult, etc., all the way on out to an old person. But biologically, you've got a human being there right from the moment. And that is the message that people need to understand. It's going to be a very painful thing for some people. But abortion is just, it terminates a human life, regardless of when you do it.
But that brings up a comment that you read in the comments to this article as well, is that here we are passing a law to save the life of an unborn Down syndrome child, but we won't do that for an unborn normal child.
Yeah, it's a paradox, isn't it? And we'll take, you know, we always accuse the other side, the pro-abortion side, of incrementalism. And this applies to not just abortion, but
Sure.
this is to everything. In the liberal world, this is the way they work it. You know, you go, they like the slippery slope. They use the slippery slope to their advantage.
So you get the one thing passed.
You get the one thing, then you move to the next thing, then it's incrementalism. That's what it's called. And so, what we're saying is, all right, we'll take this incremental step. We'll take this step that says, in Ohio at least, this is a state law that they're proposing. It's a bill, hasn't been voted on yet, but I think the governor will vote for it. But that it will be illegal to do selective abortion, just what you were talking about, Dr. Bob, that you can go in and say, oh, well, you cannot mandate that. And you actually discourage that. In fact, they put penalties on any doctor that would do that, even though the parent may request that the abortion be performed. There will be state law saying, there are penalties. There will be penalties in place for the doctors that do this.
Of course, they have to know that the child has been diagnosed this way.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. That's right.
At the end of the article, or near the end of the article, it talks about parents of 2 daughters with Down syndrome that spoke in favor of it. They say that they hope that by doing so, by supporting this can be a critical step to eliminate abortion based on individual genetic makeup.
Correct.
Which is what we've talked about before, that as long as this remains supported by Supreme Court decisions that keep abortion legal, is that it doesn't mean that we cannot refine this into so that it is infrequent.
Correct.
So if as you said, Dr. Bob, if you talked about you don't have a girl, you're going to have a girl, and you only wanted boys. So if we can avoid that, and the more we understand genomes, the more we understand genetics, probably the more we're going to be able to predetermine something about these unborn children.
Well, it gets down to almost eugenics. I mean, abortion could be used in terms of eugenics.
Certainly,
Explain what eugenics is.
Yeah. And it's like, I almost want to say, who do we think we are, that we have this wisdom of the ages, that we can determine what is good and what is not good, who was good and who was not good. And, you go back in the past, and one of the famous composers, I forget who it was, had some real problems and would have been aborted today for those
Beethoven
problems.
was deaf.
Yeah, So it's like,
he became
what?
deaf, though.
Yeah, he became deaf.
But then it comes back to that issue of self, that we feel that we can determine what is a perfect and good world. We have the vision, we have the knowledge, we have the reasoning power, but it is not so. That's not the way it is. And so, yes, in a sense, all right, Ohio is saying, no, you cannot abort. It will be illegal to abort a Down syndrome children.
Just on that basis.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, that almost flips the issue over. Well, if it's illegal, and we're talking about this, Ben, before, if it's illegal to abort them, well, then what about aborting a normal child? What about aborting a child with a cleft lip? What about aborting a child that has a valve defect in its heart?
Or diabetes. I mean,
Well, that's right.
Have any number.
Ideas have consequences, and so we're seeing the consequences of these ideas.
More to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and I'm Ben Ball, along with Dr. Bob Wilson and also Reverend Robert Cornegy, as we talk about some of the things that happened in the world. And one of the articles that has come out, of course, the debate has been going on now for months, but it looks like it may come to fruition soon, is about voting on a tax bill. Now, what does that have to do with us and on Faith Matters? Well, this is a story out of the New York Times. Says, in tax debate, gift to religious right could be bargaining chip. For years, a coalition of well-funded groups on the religious right have waged an uphill battle to repeal a 1954 law that bans churches and other nonprofit groups from engaging in political activity. Now, those groups are edging toward a once improbable victory as Republican lawmakers, with the enthusiastic backing of President Trump, prepared to rewrite large swaths of the United States tax code as part of a $1.5 trillion tax package moving through Congress. Among the changes in the tax bill that passed the House this month is a provision to roll back the 1954 ban, a move that's championed by the religious right but opposed by thousands of religious and nonprofit leaders who warned that it could blur the line between charity and politics. All right, let's get past a little bit of the partisan writing of the New York Times to talk about what they haven't mentioned here. It is called it's the Johnson Amendment is the law that they're speaking of, and it also and it has to do with your tax status. It's not. It doesn't ban actually political activity. It bans candidate sponsorship from the pulpit. Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit different from political activity, because under political activity you can include lots of things that aren't necessarily endorsing a political candidate or a political party. But this is specifically, this law is about that, and it's about the tax status. And Robert, as you were saying as we were prepping for the segment, is that it's if it's been used, it's be hard pressed to find the case where it actually has been used, but it certainly has been the Damocles sword that's been held over churches for a long time, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's the law covers more than just churches. It covers faith-based nonprofits as well.
People that fall under that tax exemption.
That's exactly right. And so, a 501c3 religious non-governmental organization would fall under that category as well. And so you have to keep that in mind when you're thinking about this. Now, they've written in the House side, it's not even in the Senate bill. So here's what we're talking about. This passed a version to eliminate this law, passed in the House version of this new tax bill. And so now the Senate is working on their side, and it's not even in theirs. And so I think Senator Langford is working on this one to get it in to the bill itself.
Yeah, he's working to insert that language into the Senate bill.
In the Senate bill. And so then it has to, whatever they pass, and the title of the article kind of gives it away. Mm-hmm. It's a bargaining chip. This is what politicians do. They put these things in there, and then you negotiate.
We're going to repeal the mandate for Obamacare,
right? And we'll give you this if you'll take scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And so we're in the political tussling right now of what this final product. But there's a huge amount of pressure, and on that has been for a long time, on trying to get this thing eliminated. Because, look, this was 1954 that this was enacted. America's existed a lot longer than 1954. And some of the comments on this, people were going back to when the original writing of the Constitution and saying that, our founders were so brilliant when they put this in there. Well, they didn't put this in there. This was never there. Yeah. This was a Texas politician, Lyndon Johnson, running for the Senate, who was trying to eliminate some of the opposition against him. He's the one that pushed this thing through in '54. So this isn't a constitutional issue at all. This is a political issue, and so it was a partisan political position that Johnson, as a Democrat, took. And it was against conservative, typically Republican. Although back then there were actually conservative Democrats.
Conservative Democrats,
Yep.
alive and well back in those
That's
days.
Right. Yeah. So it's created this conundrum. And as we've said, no one's ever been prosecuted under this, no churches. You go into many of the black churches in election season. Mm-hmm. You go into conservative churches, you go into liberal churches, they're going to be candidates in there. The idea is that you can let them come in and speak. You just can't endorse them as a church body, saying, if you belong to,
Right.
Third Baptist Church of
You will vote
Biloxi,
this way, right?
you must vote for this candidate. You just can't do that.
But you must vote for this candidate. That right there defeats the whole purpose of the thing. But in pointing out the qualities of this person, you certainly could do that legitimately, and I think quite easily. But the problem is, you pointed this out. I don't remember if it was on break or not, but you've got this sword of Damocles. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, right.
I'll give all credit to you. But the deal is, you've got this sword of Damocles hanging over, and I don't know how many people today know about that, but that thing was like held up by a hair, and it was swinging back and forth, and if you just moved ever so slightly, it was going to fall and slice your throat.
Well, I know in the Methodist Church, we are warned about it. We are warned from leadership about it. About this law and about your tax exempt status. And there's a famous, maybe not famous, but there's a church in Charlotte that famously endorsed Donald Trump and put it out on their marquee and everything else. They have refused their tax exempt status. They pay taxes. They pay property taxes. They pay taxes on any money they receive. It's interesting that they chose to not go that route so they could freely express these things. However, I just say it as a pastor, I'm a very political person, but I wouldn't dream of doing that.
Well, that's right.
That's not my job there.
And I want to amend something I said earlier.
Okay.
I said this was not a constitutional issue. This is a constitutional issue.
You going back to
sure
the first?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't written in the Constitution as in terms of
prohibiting this.
It's a free speech issue.
Yeah.
And so, literally, what the government decided was to remove free speech from assemblies, religious assemblies, in whatever context they're in. And so whether it's a religious-based college or a hospital or a church or, name the iteration, then those people who belong cannot express. Now, they may choose not to, like you just said. I mean, given the choice, you're not given the choice to do it.
Right.
That's been eliminated by the government. Now, you may choose not to do it,
yeah,
but they have taken a freedom away from you to be able to, be a part of that conversation in the marketplace. And this is really interesting because the people that are opposing this are trying to keep the Christian voice, and they say this, out of the marketplace.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to church, you can go inside the walls, you can do your little worship thing, but don't you dare bring it out and put it into the marketplace. And that's what they're upset
that's
about.
the objective. Yeah.
That's the objective. So it is a constitutional free speech issue, freedom of speech.
Well, it's interesting because I've gone back and I've read that First Amendment and, the freedom of religion. And then there's a set of words immediately following that. And the free exercise thereof.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That is so plain, but it's been twisted and modified and court decisions, and you've got this morass of junk sitting on top of it. But what the Constitution says is, yes, you are free to exercise what your faith teaches you. Mm-hmm. And so why couldn't candidate X, look at the qualities of this individual, look at their moral issue or their moral stance, look at how they have contributed to the community, look at the fact that they lead a Bible study group, whatever you want to say about that individual, you should be able to say. If a church decides to endorse, an individual church decides to endorse, why not?
Up until 1954, they could.
Yes.
Until 1954.
Yes.
They could do that.
Yep.
In America.
Right.
It was in 1954 that right was taken away.
But look at where that deletion of that right has led to.
Yeah.
I mean, you brought it up. You can't, as a Christian out in the marketplace, you can't say this is morally wrong. And I wish I had brought it along, but one of the things that oh my goodness, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In his letter from the Birmingham jail in 1963, he brought up something, and I have never forgotten this. He was asked, well, you're a pastor. How can you go against the law? And he says, look, there are two kinds of laws, just and unjust. Just laws conform to the law of God, as natural law and moral law. Unjust laws do not. But look where we are today, how many unjust laws we have. And as a matter of fact, he said, just laws, you've got to follow them, you've got to work with them, you pay attention to your leaders and so forth. Unjust laws, you should absolutely get out there and oppose.
That's a critical point, because you often hear they'll throw back at you the render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, render unto God that which is God. And they'll say there's a separation between the two. But you just said it. The laws of our society must correspond to the laws of nature, as we say in our Declaration of Independence, are of God's laws. And if they don't, they're unjust laws.
More to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station FM 107 and AM 1240. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station FM 107 and AM 1240. And we thank you for joining us. And if you listen frequently to the program, you know that we are into our final segment now. And this is sometimes we call it our Sign of the Apocalypse segment. And this comes from the Telegraph out of the United Kingdom. And the headline is, Church of Sweden to stop clergy calling God He or the Lord in bid to crack down on gendered language. And they don't even describe who writes it. It just says our foreign staff. They don't know. Nobody wants to put their name to it, apparently. So it says the Church of Sweden is encouraging its clergy to use the gender-neutral term God instead of referring to the deity as He or the Lord. The decision was made on Thursday, wrapping up an 8-day meeting of the church's 251-member decision-making body. The decision will take effect on May 20th during Pentecost. It is the latest move by the National Evangelical Lutheran Church to modernize its 31-year-old handbook on setting out how services should be conducted. Decision to update the worship gives priests new options on how to refer to God during their services. Priests can now open their services by referring to the traditional Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or the gender-neutral phrase, in the name of God and the Holy Trinity. Robert, aren't we in a wonderful place here now?
You know, I'm just sitting here thinking about this, and you guys tell me, because you're the authorities on this. I have heard the word apostasy. And I think that could be applied to this kind of a situation from what I know of it. Because
Watch yourself now.
Okay, I became a Christian not just because I went to church, but when we were in the charismatic movement, I heard the word a personal relationship with Christ. And the studies we were doing emphasized that one-to-one relationship. And what the Church of Sweden is doing wipes that away. It becomes an impersonal relationship for me. And that's like, what are we talking about here? I mean, God has always dealt with each individual person as though that person is the only one that He had ever created. And here we depersonalize God. We depersonalize the Father. We depersonalize the Almighty Lord. We're going back to what we talked about, Revelation 1:8. You know, the Lord Almighty, the Alpha and the Omega. In that church, I would not last long because I would speak my mind and probably be thrown out the door.
This is, as to your point from what Dr. Bob said, Robert, I think we have going from the personal relationship to the virtual relationship.
Yeah. Well, we're going back. It's funny. We were just talking about this in the adult class on Sunday about Paul, the Apostle Paul, in Athens, and he's invited to speak to the philosophers
This
the
is from Acts,
Athenian,
right?
yeah,
Right.
from
Okay.
Acts, the Athenian philosophers, and Areopagus. He's up there, and they've allowed him to speak, and he begins with creation basically, but then he goes into, you have this monument to the unknown God.
I love that one.
Well, we're back in Sweden. They now have the unknown God.
Yes.
And Paul, I mean, we've gone full circle, folks. We've gone right back to this idea that we're making God in our image rather than God making us in his image.
And to finish the thought on Paul, is that what he said was, you have this to an unknown God. It was sort of a cover your bases sort of thing. You know, they have all the other monuments out there as well to the ones they've named, but they figure, well, maybe there's something we've missed.
Yep.
So here's the one to the unknown God. He says, no, there is only one true God. And so you can say this one then that you're saying is your unknown God is the one true God.
Yeah.
And now, as you're saying, we want to reverse that. We want to make that now the unknown, the impersonal, the
warm, fuzzy guy, a person.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it really is alarming. And I call it may be apostasy. When people apostatize, they go for heresy. And heresy is when you start undermining the foundational beliefs of Christianity.
Okay.
Then you become a heretic.
This is
this is moving in that direction.
This really isn't new. There were a number of ancient writers who said that, well, you know, do we really think of God as gender, or do we think of Jesus even as gender? And so, while many of them were, you know, argued against in many of the pulpits of ancient times, that still exists today. I mean, I know a church leader who refuses to call God Father.
Yeah.
Who will not do it except in the Lord's Prayer.
Well, my brother-in-law, when he went to seminary, and he had to, if he referred to God as he had to refer in that paragraph as God as she. Mm-hmm. And what is happening, and we talk about this all the time, which has more influence, culture on the church or the church on culture? Mm-hmm. And so what we're seeing is we're getting this bright line developing. There used to be a lot of gray in there, but now it's not. It's becoming brighter and brighter, the separation between what Orthodox in the little o, Orthodox Christianity versus these alternative views of Christianity. Mm-hmm. And it's really getting distinct. And so, you know, those who take this stuff seriously, it isn't that we're just old-fashioned and wanting to hold on to the old-fashioned way. I mean,
patrilineal stuff.
Yeah, this is real stuff. This is all about relationship. Mm-hmm. God has invited us into relationship with him. He has made the way for that to happen through the sacrifice of his son. We have been redeemed for a purpose.
But then you get into, again, this language of the son.
Correct.
You know, and I know, again, the same church leader wants to say, instead of the son, referring to it even in communion liturgy, says, no, the special gift. Refers to the Son as the special gift or the Holy One. So even in this Swedish language, it says name of God, in the name of God and the Holy Trinity, makes a Trinity instead of three persons an entity.
Right.
You know, just that.
Yeah.
It's not
God and the Trinity.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. God is
the Trinity.
Yes.
The Trinity.
Well, you know, in sitting here thinking about this, we're talking about the influence of the church on culture or culture on the church. And one of the things that struck me is that church is heading back into the world. And Jesus was very clear on that distinction between the world and who we are. He said, you are no longer of the world. You are in the world, but you are not of the world. And here are churches saying, no, we want to be of the world. We want to be fully accepted by the current culture.
Bingo. That's a great
You know,
point.
and not enough pastors, I don't think, and I'm not certainly well versed enough to do it. I've read some good things about it, but is to talk about the theology of fatherhood and the theology of sonship. You know, there are good theology reason here when we talk about the son, the man who was born of a woman, and we talk about the church as the bride of Christ.
Yep.
You know, we do speak of gender roles here. And because so many people have had such disagreeable relationships with their own gender roles, we doesn't mean that we ascribe that to the church.
No, that's right.
And to the holy nature of God and the Trinity.
Well, the nullifying God, the title of your book, Bob, is, I think, brilliant in the sense.
Sort of like the underlying theme of this show.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, because we do see that our culture has reached that point in its cycle that we are now at the place where it's already happened in Europe where they thought so successful that they really didn't need God anymore. Mm-hmm. And so they looked for the evidences to be able to eliminate or nullify God. And we're seeing the same thing happen in our culture. It's just that we're maybe 25 years behind, but that gap is shrinking quickly. And
not in a good way.
Yeah, and so we really are at a point. It's one of those crossroad points. And
well, one of the things that I think, Ben, you and I were talking about this before Robert got here, and that's to go back to Chesterton. You know, Chesterton said, when men choose not to believe in God, they thereafter do not believe in nothing, but rather they believe in anything they want to. And this is what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to get rid of God, something's got to fill that spot. We're talking about St. Augustine before. You know, our heart is made for God. And if you're not going to allow God to get into your heart, then at that point, you're going to put something else in there.
Well, that was the big point, frankly. The Reformation was trying to reform the Catholic Church.
Yes.
And the reformers, their battle cry was Coram Deo, that each of us stand before God individually, and that we have this relationship, that personal, we call it the personal relationship, but there is this nobody, it's God and us.
Thank you for joining us this week on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. And thanks to Dr. Bob and also Reverend Robert Cornegie. We'll have more next week for you on the program.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of the Talk Station.